Hello, my name is Matt Fry from CEH, Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. I'll be talking about some of the data we're having available in the NERC Drought Water Scarcity Research Programme. We've got a huge number of new datasets coming out from across the programme. Lots of the datasets are already out, and we'll show you where you can find those in a minute. And I'm going to talk through how we're developing some tools to make some of these datasets more accessible and more easy for you to make use of. Feel free to get in touch with me, either at my email address on the previous slide or through the endows at ceh.ac.uk email address. First of all, we've produced some data on past droughts using multiple modelled data sets. In the Historic Droughts project, we've digitised rain gauge data and produced grids of that rainfall data back to 1891. This is with the Met Office working to digitise some of their historic paper archives to increase the coverage of rain gauge data sets, as you can see on the right there, and particularly in the period before 1910, where digitised rain gauges were particularly sparse. They've hugely increased the number of gauges available and produced gridded rainfall data sets based on that. They've also increased the coverage of temperature data sets in that same period back to 1891, and we've been working to produce a gridded historic data set of potential evapotranspiration from 1891 to the present day at a 5 kilometre grid scale across the UK. That data set's already out and available. The rain gauge data should be available from the Midas archives shortly. There's been a huge amount of modelling work across the programme, taking hydrological models, using this new historic data sets and producing reconstructed river flows for catchments from 1891 onwards, for hundreds of catchments across the country, multiple models. And there's also, from the grid-to-grid model, a 1 kilometre gridded data set of modelled monthly river flows and soil moisture for that same period. And those are already available, and I'll show you where you can access some of these data sets in a moment. The British Geological Survey have been reconstructing groundwater level series using the same data for over 50 boreholes across the country. And using those modelled flows and groundwater, we've been producing extended data sets, extended back into the past on drought indicators based on rainfall data, river flow data, and groundwater data. So this is things like the SPI, SSI, etc. So that's some of the data on past droughts that we've been producing, and we'll be using that to identify particular drought events in the historic record. In the Marius project, they've been working to model river flows based on future climate scenarios produced from the Weather at Home dataset. So as well as all of those climate scenarios being available already from the British Atmospheric Data Centre, they've also run those data sets through some hydrological models. So this is a big 100-member ensemble for with climate scenarios for 2 future periods in the 2050s and the 2080s. There's a full set of climate variables from those Weather at Home runs. And then using that, we have modelled daily river flows at hundreds of catchments through a number of different hydrological models. And again, as well as that catchment-based river flow outputs, we've got monthly modelled river flows and soil moisture at a 1 kilometre scale across the country. And again, those data sets will be pulled together with the historic data sets within the sector-specific work streams in the About Drought project, looking at water supply and producing a set of drought libraries, which should come out in the future. In terms of accessing the data and finding out what data is available, the best place to go is the About Drought website. You can either go to the Drought Research and look for the data sets, or you can just search for About Drought data. The second link here goes straight to the data page. So there's a page in the About Drought website which lists all of the data sets that we're producing, broken up into new hydrometeorological data sets, socio-economic data sets, and then some links to the datasets at the bottom. So we've got slightly more detailed description of some of these datasets, a full list of those with links to where you can download some of the datasets. So I'd strongly recommend you go here and look for these datasets and use this as a way to access them. Just to give you an example of what these datasets look like, they've been ingested into our principal data centers. So lots of the river flow and the hydrological outputs are in the CEH Environmental Information Data Center. And when you're accessing these datasets, you get a page for each dataset. You get a nice title description of the dataset. So this is one of the historic modeled, gridded model datasets with the grid model from the Marius project. You see you get a DOI for that dataset. So there's a kind of long-term unique identifier for that dataset that you'll always be able to use to access this page. You can click to get a citation if you want to cite that dataset in a paper. And it gives you that citation in standard format. And this page gives a kind of overview of the dataset. So a kind of brief abstract description. Some information about the authors and other useful information. For instance, the Marius project website here. There's a section on the kind of provenance and the quality of the data. This is just a sort of summary overview. And back at the top on the right here, you can see the citation. You can find the license terms and conditions. Generally, these are freely available for any use. And there's a button to click to download the datasets, at which point you'll have to log into the create an account in the data center and download the data. There's also this supporting documentation which you can download, and that provides a really helpful summary document that describes in a bit more detail, but not at the sort of level of a research paper, about how the dataset was produced. So for this dataset, we've got a document like this, the supporting information for the grid-to-grid model estimates. It gives a summary, talks about the hydrological model used, gives you a nice map of all the points that were modeled, tells you about the input data for the model, how to use the data set, and some information about the format of the data set, and a series of references at the bottom. So it's really helpful information if you actually want to make use of that data set, find out more about it before you dive in. So each of these data sets should have a page like this once they're in the data center, and these are the pages you'll get to if you follow the links in the About Drought website. So those are some of the hydrometeorological data sets we produced, but there's also a huge range of social and socio-economic data, because the program's a cross-sectoral project looking at different angles on droughts. So from the socio-economic side of things, again, in the historic droughts project, we produced this, what we're calling the historic droughts inventory. So this is an inventory of past droughts from different sectoral perspectives. The data set contains over 55,000 entries from things like newspapers, the agricultural press, from regulation, including Hansard reports, as well as oral histories from speaking to individuals to identify their experiences of past drought. There are entries from 1800 through to 2015, from past newspapers, etc. And we've got descriptions of these past droughts, including the kind of impacts of those. Lots of the entries in the inventory are geo-referenced, so they've got information about either the country or the regional or the local level about exactly where that impact occurred. And we're trying to turn that into a searchable archive of past droughts. So for example, at the bottom here, you can see an example of, this is a graph showing the number of mentions of drought in the agricultural press through the 2003 drought, particularly identifying items that reference oilseed rape, and you can search this inventory to pull out individual examples of entries which mention droughts for particular crops, and then find out what that entry said about the impact of that drought. This was from the Farmer's Guardian in November 2003. That data set we hope will be out very soon, and we're trying to produce a searchable archive so that it can be online and available for people to search through. In addition to that, we've produced a new data set of the kind of water supply infrastructure for the UK. So this is a database of all UK reservoirs, which covers 90% of the total capacity of the UK reservoirs. And as well as the location of those reservoirs. We've got information on the planning dates and the construction dates. We identify the capacity of those reservoirs and identify up and downstream gauging stations so that they can be usable in hydrological studies. And the graph here shows the development of the capacity both via the planning dates and the construction dates of these reservoirs. And we're hoping to make all of this socio-economic data available as well. So one example would be in the historic droughts web pages. We hope to produce a page for each of the droughts that we've identified from the hydrometeorological record and bring together information from across the different sectors from the weather impacts, from hydrological and meteorological impacts, looking around water, impacts on ecology, public water supply, agriculture, and impacts we've identified from the newspapers. So we hope to be producing one of these for each of these droughts back to 1890. And another way we'll be making this socio-economic data available is trying to make this drought inventory searchable. So here's a kind of sort of draft version of a tool we're developing to allow people to look at the contents of this information. So this is these 50,000 entries on droughts from past newspapers. We can allow that to be searched by a particular year, by entering either a year or a particular piece of text, and find examples of droughts based on those search terms. So these are examples from 2003 from the Times, the Telegraph, the Observer, and you can get a feel for the types of information that coming out through the newspapers. You can also search for particular terms if you're interested to find out the impacts of this drought on barley. You can type in a particular term and see if there's information that relates to that. And you could use this to identify drought impacts at a specific reservoir or a particular part of the country, or for a particular type of impact. So here are the entries for barley in relation to drought in 2003 from newspapers and farming agricultural magazines. So it's a hugely interesting resource, and we hope to produce something like this to make it available within the About Droughts program. So some of the other ways we're trying to make some of the drought data more accessible through enhancing access to the data for lots of users is firstly by making the data downloadable through these data centers, as I showed before. We're also trying to provide web-based access to lots of the data. We're trying to produce APIs or programming interfaces to allow programmers to just pull out particular bits of the datasets they want, because some of these datasets are quite huge, 1 kilometer grids for the past 120 years, for example. If you don't want to download the entire dataset, you can use the API to extract this information. We'll be writing guidance and to use those APIs. We're also producing some interfaces for exploring some of the modeling data. And I'll be talking about one of these in a moment. We hope to produce a simple kind of point and click map-based application to allow you to choose an area of interest, show a map of the data, choose a particular location, show a graph of that data, and extract that in a simple format such as an Excel spreadsheet. There's a potential for us to produce lots of derived metrics as well, for example, change factors for future scenarios, etc. We'll also be trying to feed some of the research into producing real-time indicators for drought and making use of those. And in trying to bring those real-time indicators into our droughts portal, enhancing that with different metrics. So just a quick word about the data formats we're producing for some of the hydrometeorological data. Some of the point data we're trying to produce in simple CSV files so that it's very easy to use, and you can see there's a map of some of the gauging stations modeled by the grid-to-grid model, and here's a spreadsheet of some of just showing how that data is available in a simple format with dates and river flows with a column for each of the gauging stations. So we hope that's as easy to use as possible. Where the datasets get bigger, these large gridded time series, we're using this NetCDF format. So this is a format that allows us to, in a quite compact and kind of quite well described way, to store multiple grids, one for each time slice in the dataset. And it's a commonly used format across the kind of environmental sciences, but we know we need to do a bit of work to make that data more easily accessible. So this is where the programmatic access comes in. We're developing a data infrastructure for these about drought datasets to allow kind of fast and simple programmatic access. So with a really short bit of code, such as this in Python, you can pull out a particular grid cell or a particular time series from a grid cell. And we'll be writing guidance and example scripts and documentations of those APIs so that we'll make them as easy as possible for people to pick up and use. As I said, we're producing some applications for making this data access simple. So you can find a data set, see what it looks like, produce a graph for a location of interest, or upload a shapefile of a catchment and extract a time series over that catchment and download that data in a simple CSV type format. So I'll quickly show some examples of these interfaces we're producing to help the data sets be more easy to understand. So this is an application that lets you delve into the flow reconstructions from the historic droughts project. So you can see maps of all the catchments that have been modelled, and that's kind of interactive map. You can find the catchment you're interested in and see how well the modelling worked based on the colour coding here. You can actually delve into the detailed modelling statistics over the calibration period, see how well the modelling worked. So for individual catchments, you can see where they sit on these scales. And you can choose a catchment and plot up some of the model data. So you can rank data sets based on the model parameterizations and view outputs, view the flow data outputs. In addition to that, there's an application. So in addition, there's another of these interfaces that lets you explore past droughts. So again, there's a map for all the catchments that have been displayed, showing those by region. And we can, for a selected catchment, we can look at the reconstructed drought based on this standardized streamflow index, based on some particular thresholds for, say, a 6-month accumulation period, if we're interested in severe droughts, and it will identify the periods where that indicator is showing that there were droughts in the past. So we've identified these series of events and shown the severity of these droughts on a plot and the duration of these droughts in months to explain the severity of some of those past droughts. We can kind of take those events for a given catchment and rank them, so you can find particular droughts, find the most severe droughts in the past record based on different metrics. And you can also look at a sort of regional analysis to see the percentage of the whole of the UK that was in drought over a particular period. So if we choose a period of in the 1930s, say, we can see each drought and see how much of the country was in drought based on the streamflow record. Again, at the bottom here, we can step through different years and see how much of the country was in drought in a given year based on this data. So it really helps people it's a huge model data set, and it really helps users to explore exactly what the outputs are for a given drought event of interest. And finally, I'll just show the CEH drought portal. So we're hoping to introduce additional drought metrics into the drought portal. This is already a near real-time portal which is updated each month with data. Currently, it's just based on rainfall deficit information to define droughts. So in June 2018, we can see how rainfall deficits have looked over the past 6 months, 3 months, and the past very dry 1 month period. We can plot those up as catchments at different scales. If we zoom in, we can see a slightly more detailed scale. And if we turn those catchments off, we can see the raw underpinning gridded data. We can actually choose an individual catchment, such as the Thames, and extract the entire past record for the Thames catchment, and zoom in on an area of that record. Again, looking at 1, 3, or 6 months, say, of the accumulation period for the rainfall deficit. And you can see how the drought varies both spatially and in time. We'll be hoping to update this portal with additional metrics, such as river flow indicators and groundwater, again, hopefully in near real time. So that's just a summary of some of the drought data sets that we're producing in the program and how you can access them. As I said before, please get in touch if you've got any questions or you want more information about any of these data sets, and look at the About Drought web pages for more detailed information. Thanks very much.